No.
You could have had it, over 1,000 by now.
No. And I mean, for the longest time, I didn't know what I wanted to be either. And I mean, if you're also during that period between crawling down the hallway and German measles, I think during that period, I think was watching a lot of television. There was, I was around 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, thought TV was great, and we got 4 channels, and I could tell you what was on any time of day or night on any of those channels. And I also like comic books. So I sort of hold myself up as a bad example.
Yeah, you don't seem like a comic book person to me. Maybe I'm completely wrong, or
well,
I'm being a bit judgmental. I don't know.
Well, my brother had comics, and we would and the way you got to read other comics was you'd trade them. And so that's how we got to read a lot of comics. Yeah, no, I like comics. Much more recently, I've come to really find fascinating and very engaging graphic novels, and particularly graphic memoirs. There's been such a boom in recent years, and it's so interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily relate it to my comic book period.
So were you a loquacious kid or shy? Or neither? Well,
I was sort of both. Though it's interesting because I'm told I was very loquacious. I mean, I don't remember it all that well, but one of my grandmothers thought I should be a lawyer because I like to talk a lot, or I think I like to argue a lot, or I wasn't really that obedient, and so that's where the loquaciousness came in. But there was a period a bit later on, actually, more around university, when I got acutely terrified of doing anything in public, and public could mean speaking at a seminar.
Yeah.
And I don't know what caused that. It was a very strange phenomenon. I've actually just been reading about Renee Fleming, and she describes going through a period in her life when she had terrible periods of what do you call it when you're like. She went through terrible periods of stage fright. See, that's called a pickup, so when we edit it, I won't have gotten the word from you, so I'll just do that once more.
You've got prompters all over the hall.
Oh, that's it. I need them, that's the thing. I was just reading about Renee Fleming in a memoir of hers, and she talks about how she was singing all over the place, and then she went through this terrible period of stage fright. And not that my situation is in any way comparable. She also actually spent some time living in a railway apartment in New York.
As you did.
And as Marie Forrester did, so maybe I should have been an opera singer.
Yeah. Now, the Montreal is known for its literary culture, Richelieu, Nicole Brossard, Hugh MacLean, etc. And that's where you grew up. What was the Montreal of your youth like?
It was very separated, Anglo-Franco, and we knew about Hugh MacLennan. I knew that he taught at McGill, and we knew about Mordecai Richler because everybody was angry with him. And Irving Layton's poetry was the first living poet who, even in high school, that I knew about. And actually, I should add another formative influence alongside my siblings was high school. And I went to a high school that was part of the public school board, and it had a reputation for, I believe, the highest number of unwed pregnancies. But it was also streamed, and I was in what's called Latin and Science. I don't know what that really meant, except that I took physics instead of North American literature. So I actually had a very late introduction to Canadian fiction. But my high school students, there was a very strong peer group of very bright kids, and it was through them that I was introduced to classical music, to Russian fiction, to reading and to books. It was, in addition to the sort of, that's when I graduated from Sue Barton to actually reading something more worthwhile. And when I talked about these scholarships at high school, what you got was a book token, which was worth $5 or $10 at a classics bookstore, which was an independent bookstore in Montreal. And for $5 or $10, you could get a lot of paperbacks in those days. And I remember asking an older friend to accompany me to choose what books. And I remember like Carson McCullers' Member of the Wedding, and Nicholas Kazantzakis' The Last Temptation of Christ, and bringing home these paperbacks. And they were the first books that I actually chose and owned.
Now this, roughly what age is this?
High school, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Somewhere you talked about reading and books being a passion and a solace for you. Is that, can you tell us more about that?
It sounds sort of grand. I'm sure I said that, but it sounds a little bit grand when I hear it now. I think it was more that reading was company.
Yeah.
Reading has always been good company. I'd never leave home without a book. If I have to wait in line anywhere or do anything, I'm extremely impatient, except if I have something to read, in which case I can just be happy. I remember reading Jane Gardam's book recently, the sequel to...
The Man with the Wooden Hat.
The Man with the Wooden Hat, thank you. The sequel to Old Filth. And I was stuck at an airport. It was Christmas, and you know, the flight delays and everything was, you know, the typical mess. And I was totally absorbed in that book, and didn't matter what happened as long as I could turn the page.
Perhaps you have answered this already, but you know, all writers, well, all adults really have some person in their youth that was a key influence. Was there one person for you who was that influence?
Not really. I would think it was more the collective influence of my high school class. And we did have a very good English teacher in 8th and 9th grade, David Thomas, who was Welsh, and he didn't really follow the curriculum. I guess you didn't have to, or there wasn't that strict. So that he introduced, I remember we read Wuthering Heights when I was 13, Pickwick Papers, some Charles Dickens and Shakespeare. He'd have us read Shakespeare plays in class, but I didn't have a special relationship. I mean, I'm not a writer. I think writers have these kinds of special encouragements more than
Did you want to be a writer?
No.
No?
No, I subscribe to the obsession theory of creativity. And I really do. I mean, you know, Rilke's advice to the young poet, you know, do anything if you dig ditches, do anything if you don't have to be a writer, if you don't have to be a poet. I shouldn't tell you that, but... and so I really think you do it because you're driven to do it. It's so hard, and it's so hard to do well. And I mean, I've written fiction, and I've done journalism and so on, but I've never been driven to write fiction. I feel relieved, if anything.
So what do you think you were going to be when you grew up?
I didn't know, and I initially didn't bother me. I sort of knew what I didn't want to be, and I knew I didn't want to be a teacher, and and then I realized later on that I didn't want to be a university professor. It started off as a kid in primary school that I see what the teachers were doing. I knew that isn't what I wanted to do, and I didn't have any idea, and it troubled me for a long time. I think of myself as a late starter. When I look back now, it doesn't seem like it was that late, but at the time, I didn't really know.
So, jump now a bit and tell us how you got into radio. How did that begin? How did that part of your life begin?
Well, I'm just gonna take some water.
Yep.
I was moving to Vancouver and was thinking I was going to do something in magazine journalism because I wasn't really interested in hard news, following the politician, prescribed newspaper work, but I was interested in writing. And I thought I'd do magazine journalism. And when I moved to Vancouver, I went around in the magazines. There were a few small magazines, and they didn't have jobs. You could freelance. So then I heard that there was a job at CBC Radio on the morning show as a producer. So I went down, and it turned out that the job was already filled, that they already had someone in mind for that position. But I could freelance. So I thought, okay, that's what I'll have to do. And in order to freelance for the morning show, you had to do something that the regular host couldn't do. Something quirky, I think, is how they did it. And so I had a list of ideas, and I had a little tape recorder and a microphone, which weren't very good, but I went out with that. I had a list of ideas. I showed it to the producer, and then he ticked off a few of them, and then I went out. And the first thing I did was interview a Mexican mime who was performing at the Vancouver Art Gallery.